And after placing a cold washcloth over my forehead, she lay on her side, adjusted my pillow, and with a slight smirk gently reminded me, "It's not your deathbed." It almost was. And this is called If Lovers Were Books. I guess today, I mean, these poems wouldn't work if lovers were Kindles. But we do love our Kindles. If lovers were books, they wouldn't argue or disagree or impose on our space if we didn't want them to. Their shelf life would be longer. We'd always be sure when we reached the end. Who knows? We might even start over, because they'd always stay the same. And if we did leave, at least we'd know it was us that changed. We could lay them on their sides, press our hands against their spines, and slip between their tattered covers that we are always free to close. I did manage to write one poem about Anna and I, which is just sort of a goofy one, but I'll read it. Since I'm kind of happy now, I have to look at news articles and so forth to find any material to write. No, not kind of happy. Oh, man. I have to play it up, you know. Black. This is called Rebel. The car had been swerving erratically and running stop signs, so a neighbor had called the cops. When police in Weber County, Utah finally ended the chase, the 7-year-old boy jumped out of the driver's seat with his hands up. He told them he had stolen the family car to avoid going to church that morning. If that were our kid, my wife said, I wonder how he would rebel. If that were our kid, I told her, he'd probably steal the family car and drive it to church. All right, this is called Room. Whenever I buy a cup of coffee, I always appreciate how the barista will ask, do you need room? And I think, what a better world it'd be if we all just did this. You're at work, the stress piled up, when the boss nudges you, pops the question, and off you go home for the week. Your lover, after spending days together, wakes up and at the nod of your head, without saying anything, gets dressed and leaves. You're on the freeway, about to miss the exit, when the driver in the next lane sees your blinker, gently taps his brakes, and with a flash of his light signals you're clear. Imagine what could happen at the borders of India and Pakistan, Israel, Palestine, China, and Tibet, or the inner borders of harsh judgment and bitter regret. Imagine if the Pilgrims had asked the Indians, Cortez the Aztecs, just before he turned around his ships. Imagine a suicide bomber ordering his last mortal cup of Java at a Jerusalem cafe, doomsday device strapped to his chest, only to be astonished by the barista's question nobody in his terrorist training camp ever bothered to ask. It's a basic amnesty carried far beyond a coffee cup, that whether or not it intends to be, says a lot about the importance of allowing each other space to feel and think. Yes, I always tell the barista, even though I don't take cream. Because with room, nothing ever spills, creates a dark black stain, scorches me. I read this last time too. This is called The Math Mortician. Was in that New York Quarterly. I thought I had to wait. I only had to wait a year and a half. So. The Math Mortician. Instead of bodies, he sees numbers, readies them up on time's table, dresses them in brackets, uses algorithms over aspirate to extract each variable, hypothesizes infinity is but an empty set, and life an interval between two ends, whose value is an absolute when death's the only constant. Now we're getting darker. Going into the wrong way. A few more here. This is called Forsaken. Forsaken. About a time when I was in 6th grade, a terrifying experience I had at a Christian school for one semester before my parents got me out of there. But it is about a kid named David who was real, who I knew there. It's called Forsaken. Then there was David, whose dad poured kerosene on him when he was 6 years old, lit him up like a sparkler in a Buena Park motel. 90% of his body charred, leaving him hairless, lips swelled like a mouth inside a suction cup. Every Friday we said hello on the way to chapel at Eastside Christian, before filling the pews with our other classmates, where we learned about Christ's bleeding palms and the cosmic custody battle between God and Abraham, where we learned about the meaning of sacrifice and all the mysterious ways that fathers love their sons. All right, well, because of this dark thing, I think it was Jeff, actually, the last reading, came up to me and I think he said, "Hey, it's dark stuff, man." God, you know, why am I always writing this stuff? I tried to write something a little more light. Another article, because I have nothing else to write about. But Anna reminded me that my choice of who I chose to write about was still dark. So this is actually a news article that date here July 23rd. Darth Vader holds up a New York bank. With the Death Star in foreclosure, the stormtroopers laid off, he had begun to doubt his unwavering faith that the Force would be with him. Not even his old pal Jabba was willing to grant him a loan to pay his child support, citing too high a credit risk in an unstable galactic economy. The bank surveillance camera showed a nervous cyborg disguised in camouflage, one mechanical hand pointing a lightsaber at the scared young teller. But it was the heavy breathing that had ultimately tipped off authorities. And as he fled the scene that morning, Darth Vader felt a tinge of nostalgia for the good old days, when he could warp speed himself out of any situation, or choke a man unconscious if he really needed to escape. He despised the life of the petty criminal, preferring to smash rebel alliances and seize their assets, play all those Jedi mind tricks that had once earned him a reputation as CEO of the dark side. Before the bankruptcies and calls for reform came, when the growth of the empire had still seemed inevitable, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. This is another one that's coming in the New York Quarterly, but could be a decade.
Lost mine.
So you better remember it now.
Don't worry, they had lost mine.
It's called The Role of Art. Art is an introvert. At parties, it sticks to walls nobody notices. When it speaks, it struggles to be heard. Like all who tell the truth, art has few patrons, is always offending somebody. Art is solitary, rebellious, abstract. It is not communal. And when embraced too fully, has a tendency to crash things down. Not wishing to be known, not wishing to be liked, not wishing the acclaim of its more popular cousin, cliché, art is an outcast, whose only role is to protect its value by doing everything for its own sake and hoping that it matters. All right, this will be the last one, called In Our 20s. That was actually unfurled recently. In our 20s, cigarettes were wonderful. As I've said before, they still are. What am I on, 8 months since I quit? Drinking meant crazy. Girls felt glorious. Parents were distant and hadn't died or fallen ill yet. Friends seemed plentiful. Music couldn't be loud enough. Living with a lover was like playing house. Experience was urgent. Summers meant travel. Nights seemed infinite. Hangovers ended quickly. Yes, this is a fun thing about getting old. Work was provisional until our talents were discovered. Marriage was a life sentence. Divorce, parole. Success was more inevitable than failing. Suicide seemed romantic. The world was in love with us. We were in love with the world. We swooned inside its magnificent blue form. We walked with lightness. We even strutted. We thought we were invincible. We thought we were old. Thank you.